2019. Let's see.
Let me think here.
Oh, Penguin, shut up.
I have two, I think. I don't remember the other. My favorite book of 2019 was... God, what was the title? What to Save in a Fire. It was funny, it was brain fluff, and it was just entertaining. If you're tired of all the seriousness in this world, you want brain fluff and a firefighter, here's the book for you.
County Cork mystery series. It's supposed to take place in Ireland. So it just follows a particular person who inherits a bar, and she's American, but she has Irish lineage, and so she's learning all sorts of stuff while she's there and kind of finding her way. It's interesting. Of course, there's always murder or something going on too. So, and she's in the middle of it.
My favorite book of 2019 was Among the Hidden by Margaret Haddix. It's about basically a dystopia where each family is only able to have 2 kids. So basically the book revolves around the 3rd kid that is hidden from the rest of the world. And if he's found, there's a lot he could possibly result in death of this kid. So the little kid is hidden in the attic, and that's where he has to stay. And he looks outside, and the new neighbors across the street. He sees a third kid in there as well. So that's probably my favorite book, because that's like favorite part of the book, because that's when it starts to get like interesting.
My favorite book was The Library Book by Susan Orlean. I've worked in a library for over 20 years, but there's so much I didn't know. It was well written. It's a great book. It started with the fire at the Los Angeles Library in '86. And then it went into the history and who was director, how they got there, whether they wanted to be there, if they got there through money, and it described how much that library does for the city, for the homeless, how much it can't do, and just generally about libraries, and I love libraries.
It's a book I read this year. It was called A Curse So Dark and Lonely, and it's like a reimagining of Beauty and the Beast. So instead of like the traditional fairy tale, it's about a girl who lives in modern day DC who has cerebral palsy, and she gets accidentally kind of transported to like a fantasy world, and then it's kind of like Beauty and the Beast from there, but with some major differences. But unlike the original, like in this version, she interacts a lot more with like the people of the kingdom, and so there's more characters, I guess, or just different kinds of characters. She meets a prince who's been cursed, but she doesn't know that he's the beast yet. In this version, he only turns into a beast like towards the end of his curse, which it's weird.
So my favorite book of 2019, I have 2. I think, a fiction and a nonfiction. My favorite fiction book was The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. It was set in Chicago in the 1980s during the AIDS crisis, and it's just sort of about how the crisis affected communities there, and it's told through this group of close friends, and you're sort of put inside their little group, so you get to know everybody and how what's happening is affecting them. It was heartbreaking, but it was also one of those books that I put down and then wanted to read 1,000 other things. I also read, it's called An American Summer by Alex Kotlowitz, who's the guy who wrote There Are No Children Here, if you remember that book from like 20 years ago now. He sort of examined the way gun violence has impacted communities on the south and west sides of the city. So like when you see those stories on the news at night, you know, like a 12-year-old girl was caught in crossfire or whatever, he would go into that story, like dig deeper into it, like who is the 12-year-old, who was the intended target, who's the person that did the shooting, you know, like where are all these people and how have all of their lives been sort of formed by growing up in this community where gun violence is like an everyday occurrence, and you know, like kids are growing up with PTSD and things like that. So that just was sort of fascinating too. But both really sad books, actually, which is not my normal milieu, I guess.
I was trying to think. I'm like, oh, what was the like a entertaining sort of like fiction book or something like that? And then I'm like, no, the book I kept thinking of was I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle Magmare, which is basically she's researching the Golden State Killer, and I'm like, no, this is not like my typical read. This is not like, oh my god, I love this book. It was just, I was so entranced by it. First 200 pages of the book are her descriptions of accounts of his attacks. I live on the 4th floor of an apartment building, and I'm reading this and how he got into people's houses, and I'm locking my windows, knowing full well the only person who can get in there is like Spider-Man. Like, it just like made me uncomfortable in it. So I'm not selling this book well, like, oh god, it's gonna make you so uncomfortable. No, it was good though. Like, I just like in an awful way, sort of like you're reading about this awful person doing awful things, and they actually happened, but I couldn't stop reading it. Hey, how's it going? Thanks for watching. What would you have said? Comment down below with your answer and let's keep the conversation going. See you next time.